Shelby here. Welcome back to my channel. I'm glad y'all are with me. We are going to be doing my June mid-month wrap-up video today. And before we get into it, I do want to ask that you subscribe if you haven't already, if you enjoy my content, and make sure you like this video if you enjoyed it. But yeah, I am afraid this is probably going to end up being a really long video, and I'm going to try to get through all these books as quickly as I can. But I ended up reading 16 books in the first half of June. Granted, a lot of those were more like novella length, but I did get through quite a lot of books. I think this is the most I've ever gotten through in just half of a month. So yeah, we're just gonna get right into it. I have mostly been reading. I've been wanting to reread and read all of Simone's backlist. I've read most of her books, but there's still a few that I haven't gotten to. So I just started the month off by reading her backlist. And then since it's Pride Month, I've also been reading a lot of LGBTQ romances. So those are primarily what I've been reading this month. So the first book that I read is going to be Misadventures of a Curvy Girl by Simone. She wrote a few stories in this whole like Misadventures like series that lots of authors have written in. And I don't actually own this one. I am wanting to buy it pretty soon, so there'll be a picture up here. This is a like menage romance about our heroine, who she is a curvy woman, and she has like is a photographer for, I can't remember if it's like a magazine or something, and she's going to this place to take pictures, and it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It's a rural town, and her car breaks down, and there's this really hunky cowboy person, and he comes out and he rescues her, and he takes her back to his house while she's staying there taking pictures. But he's immediately very attracted to her, and she finds out that he has a roommate situation, and that his roommate might also be attracted to her. So that's kind of the scenario for this one. I gave this one 4 stars. This was a reread for me. I have read this previously. I really liked the characters in this. I really liked our hunky cowboy character. He is such a cinnamon roll and is so sweet. And then his roommate is an ex-soldier. This book does deal with a little bit of like PTSD for him. There is also like fat shaming and like slut shaming in this. That some things that our heroine is having to deal with her ex-boyfriend, just like thoughts that she has. This is one of those books that even though she is a plus size character, she isn't quite to the point in her life where she like owns her figure and feels good about herself. She's in the process of getting to that point. So at the very beginning, she like dresses how she wants and she feels good and feels sexy, but she does have some setbacks during this book. So it's not like she is at the point where she feels terrible about how she looks and her weight, but she also isn't to the point where she feels wonderful and doesn't care. It's like a kind of a little bit of a journey that she goes through with this book. Some issues that I did have with this does feature a 3rd act breakup, which was a little annoying to me. And this is also classified as an MMF story. So in those, instead of being like MFM and MMF, the male characters have a relationship together too. But that was a very, very small part of it. And I didn't really understand that whole dynamic between our 2 male characters. They're just like friends who have been together. And I really wanted a little bit more depth into those 2 characters. Then I read Misadventures of a Professor, so another book in the Misadventures series by Simone. This one is about a girl, and she's going to England, and she's going to be an assistant to a professor over in England because her dad is also a professor and kind of knows him while she's going through, I think she's in graduate school. But she is also a virgin, so her first night she actually ends up going going to England a little bit early before she has to meet with the professor she's going to be working with, and she's a virgin, so she decides that she wants to lose her virginity and have a one-night stand with somebody. So she meets this guy who is willing to kind of do this, and then lo and behold, once she finally meets the professor that she's going to be working for, she finds out that her one-night stand was that guy. And yeah, so that's pretty much what this one is about. I give this 4 stars. This one and the next Misadventures book are probably my 2 favorites that Sarah Simone did for the Misadventures series. I really liked this. Like, this is a little bit more, I feel like, taboo, because it's kind of like teacher student slash you know, she's his assistant. This does delve a little bit more into BDSM, which I feel like Sarah Simone has a lot in her books, and I think she does BDSM really well. So we get a little bit more of that in this book. Oh, there is also a surprise pregnancy in here, which the characters have to deal with because our hero has kind of been jilted in the past with his lovers. He had somebody that kind of had like a surprise pregnancy, and it was just bad for him. So there is a little bit of things that they have to work through. But overall, I did really enjoy this. Oh, and I forgot to mention, so the last book, The Curvy Girl, I would consider the steam on that more medium-high steam, where Sarah Simone's books are typically pretty high steam. Like this one, I would consider high steam. Then we have Misadventures in Blue by Sarah Simone, which is the last book that she did for the Misadventures series. And this is a cop romance. This is about our heroine is a detective, and she has been in the police force or whatever for a while, and she's known as the Ice Queen after her fiance, who is also a policeman, died on the job. And we have our hero of the story, who is a rookie cop, and there is like a burglary that happens, and he is talking to our heroine about it, and he really admires her and is very attracted to her. So they start to form a kind of a more of a sexual relationship at first, but then it delves into a little bit more. This one is very high steam, and I loved it. I gave this one 4 stars as well. So it is a older woman, younger man romance. There are trigger warnings for death of a loved one, because like I said, our heroine lost her fiance while he was on the job as a cop. So she does have still some grief and trauma from that, and that's kind of why she's known as like the Ice Queen and hasn't really moved on with anybody else since then. This does have some pretty steamy scenes. There is a scene where they have sex at the police station. But yeah, so overall, I really enjoyed this one. Then we have Porn Star by Sarah Simone, which she also co-wrote with Laurelin Paige. This obviously is a pretty steamy book. This is about 2 porn stars, and especially our hero, he started out in the porn star industry, whereas our heroine just kind of does some odd like porn jobs on the side of her going to school. But our hero is wanting to like do something different, and he has this idea to do more kind of like almost like reality porn. Kind of like he wants to make more of like a story with doing porn, and he really wants our heroine to do it with him, partly because he's very attracted to her, and they're gonna be the two people that are like acting in this, and they start to fall for each other, but they have to deal with like, she is like, is this actually real, or is this all an act for our show? I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I also do really like, there are some talks in this book about like sexual assault, especially in porn industry. She ends up, there's a scene where she goes to work on this other porn site, and she feels uncomfortable, but they're wanting to like make her do things anyway. So I do like that it has some conversations, at least a little bit, about like consent, and dealing with those things. They do have a little bit of some exhibitionism in this. Yes, so trigger warnings, there is a brief sexual assault. Nothing as far as like penetration and rape, but she said no and wasn't comfortable, but things kind of happened. But again, and this is high steam. Then I read Wrath by Ellis James. This is a male-male romance. This is about Josh and his parents who are married, and his stepbrother is moving in with them where he had previously lived with his mom and Ezra. And it starts off a little bit of like a bully romance because they don't really get along at the beginning. Ezra makes some not very nice comments to Josh in this book, but then they start to form, like, they have an attraction to each other and they start to kind of form a romance. I have mixed feelings about this book. I end up giving it 3 stars. On the one hand, I really enjoyed our 2 characters. They end up going through, at least one of them especially, goes through a lot of trauma, both past and present trauma during this book. So there's a lot of emotions going into this, and especially with their relationship and things that they work through. So I did really enjoy that. However, things that I did not enjoy. One, this was way too long. This is like a 700-page book. And I seriously think that like 300 pages of this could have been cut out of the story, and it would have been the same story and it would have gotten the same things across. Another thing that I did not like, there is a little bit of a time jump. Like, you're still kind of with the story for several months, but there's basically like a year time jump, and I'm not the biggest fan of those. I can kind of understand it in this situation because of stuff that happens, but for the most part, I'm not a fan of that. Another thing I didn't really care for is these 2 characters were constantly calling each other dude and like bro, and I'm just like, okay, so are we just frat boys? Like, I get that men have different types of like vernacular that they use with other men. You know, I am a woman, so I don't really use that type of stuff. But if I was in a relationship with somebody that I was in love with, even after they like said that they love each other and that they're together, they're a couple, they still keep calling each other dude and bro. And I'm just like, why are we still using that language? It just didn't fit, and I didn't really care for it. Trigger warnings for this. So one of our characters does undergo conversion therapy for being gay, which is very traumatizing to him, obviously. So there are trigger warnings for that. There are also depression, attempted suicide, assault and abuse. Like I said, this is a pretty heavy book, and the steam on this is really high. I feel like it could have come together a lot better than what it did. Then I read Hot Cop, which is another book by Simone and Laurelin Paige. This is another cop romance. This is about our heroine, and she is a librarian, and she is freaking out because she is almost 30. She turned 29 and she's like, oh my God, I'm going to be 30 in a year. And she really feels like her biological clock is ticking. She wants to have a family and wants to have kids, but she doesn't have any interest in anybody, and she doesn't really want to be in a relationship. So then she ends up meeting our hero, who is a cop, and they immediately have this strong sexual attraction to each other. So she decides she's going to straight up and be blunt and ask him, hey, can we make a contract together for you to knock me up so I can have a baby? Because he's more of like a playboy character. He doesn't necessarily want to have kids at this time. And he's very attracted to her and just really wants to have sex with her. And so he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Oh, I didn't write down what I rated this. I believe I rated this a 4-star. I really liked this book, mostly because it's breeding kink, and for whatever reason, I'm just a big fan of like breeding kink, and I love it. Also, I just really like the whole like cop kind of scenario. They do end up having sex in the police car, which was pretty hot and steamy. This is pretty funny too. And the steam on this was really high, obviously, and I really liked it. Then I read Tangled Vows by Anna Stone, which is the first book in a Mistress series. I picked this up because I was wanting to read more sapphic romances. This is about Yvonne, I think is how you say that name, and she is like a businesswoman, but I believe her dad died, and they didn't really get along because he didn't like that she was a lesbian. But in order for her to get her inheritance, she has to get married, but there's no clause in this like contract that she has to marry a man. So she's in Las Vegas and she runs into Ruby, who is an escort and is very attracted to Yvonne. So they make a deal that they're going to get married so that Yvonne can claim her inheritance. And that is kind of the situation with this. I give this 3 stars. I just really couldn't get into this story, and I didn't really feel much of a connection to either of these 2 characters. I was expecting it to be a lot steamier than it was. I would consider this to be medium to high steam, especially because they just kept talking about how Yvonne just had these like carnal tastes that like she didn't think Ruby would be up for. So it does feature like BDSM, like Yvonne is a dom, a like femme, like woman dom. But for the most part, I thought this was a lot tamer than a lot of like BDSM stories that I've read. And like I said, I was just expecting this to be a little bit more steamier. So it was 3-star. Then I read The Awakening of Ivy Leavold, which is by Sierra Simone. This is in her Markham Hall series. This is actually like the first like book series that she wrote. And this is a historical romance. This is, if you didn't know, this is actually a Jane Eyre retelling. This is about Ivy, and her brother has passed away, and he was kind of like taking care of her. She has no other family left. So she ends up going and staying with her dead cousin's husband, and he's the only one that can like take her in so she can live. Otherwise she'll have to like be a governess and make her own money. And they immediately have a big like chemistry, sexual attraction to each other. The steam on this is high. I gave this 4 stars, mostly because I loved the build up between these 2 characters, and their sexual tension was just crazy high. So I was just like, I just loved them together. But trigger warnings, I don't know if it's trigger warnings, but just so you're aware, this is a very toxic relationship. So then I read Heart and Hand by Rebel Carter, which is another historical romance. This is a MFM. So I mean, I guess this one isn't technically an LGBTQ romance, but I thought it could have been, because I knew it was a throuple, but I didn't realize it was an MFM. I was kind of hoping it was going to be an MMF, but I didn't get that. This is about our heroine, who is a mail order bride, and she's going out to like Utah or something to get married to 2 men who are best friends. Now, how she's able to do this, because I wouldn't think that would be legal even back then, who knows, but she is legally getting married to 2 men who are best friends. I give this 2.5 stars. I had lots of issues with this. Number 1, the steam on this was medium, and I really wanted the steam to be a little bit higher than that. Number 2, I did not understand the whole MFM dynamic. They were like soldiers in the Civil War, and I just didn't understand why they wanted to be in like sharing a woman and being in a throuple, even though like they weren't, the 2 of them weren't together. It didn't make any sense to me. All they just kept saying was just because of the war, and I was like, what? Another thing I had big issues with in this book was there is a side character named Rosemary, and she just stirs up a lot of shit. She likes one of the males and wants to be with him, and she's always going and flirting with him, and it makes our heroine jealous, and she doesn't really care for it, but she doesn't know if it's her place to say anything because they've been friends in the past. And our hero just kind of like takes it and is like always going and talking with her and not wanting to be with his wife, and I just had lots of problems with that. I was not okay with that. So I was very hopeful for this because I had heard good things about this series, but and because it does feature like LGBTQ stories in a historical romance format, which I'm very interested in, but I just was not impressed by this book, so I don't think I will be continuing on with this series. Then I read The Education of Ivy Leavold by Simone. This one just kind of continues the story, but they now are in a like sexual relationship, and Ivy is wanting to learn how to be a submissive towards Julian, who is our hero, because he is a dom. This one I gave 3 stars. I initially, when I read these before, I think I'd given all of these like 4 stars, but now rereading it, I'm kind of bumping down the stars, mostly because I really can recognize that this is more of a toxic relationship, and I don't feel like this is a loving relationship. This is much more of a lust. Like, they talk about how they love each other, but there's nothing to like show it. Like, all they want to do is just have sex with each other. There is also a bit in this that I do not care for, where he uses anal sex, like first time anal sex, as a punishment, and I'm not okay with that. I just don't think that should be a punishment. That is not okay, and it just really bothered me. But I did like their sex is like so steamy, and their connection that way is so great that it still like pulls me in, so that's why it didn't get a lower rating. Then I read The Punishment of Ivy Leavold by Simone, and then later on I read The Reclaiming of Ivy Leavold, which it's classified as being separate on Goodreads, but like in this newest edition, when these got recovered, she just kind of put The Reclaiming in with this one, because The Reclaiming is really more of like an epilogue novella, so I think it makes sense that it's not like a standalone by itself. So anyway, in The Punishment, Ivy has kind of come to her senses a little bit that this isn't the greatest relationship. So she runs away because she realizes that she's not going to take Julian's crap because he hasn't been being honest with her. And so he is going to try to reclaim her and win her back. Again, the steam on this is high. I gave this like 3.5 stars because I did like a little bit more that she's like not just in this like extreme lust fog with him, and she's kind of coming to her senses and like standing her ground a little bit more with him, so I did appreciate that. And then with The Reclaiming of Ivy Leavold, like I said, it's more of like an epilogue novella. They, after the birth of their son, because they do get married, and that one, again, I gave that one 3 stars. I just didn't really care for, because with that, it's a reclaiming. She doesn't really know how to be a wife again. She just feels like she's only a mother, and he's trying to help her like be sexual again, and I just had some issues with that. And I just think it could have been done better, but that was more of like me problems with it. I have 5 more books to talk about, and we're gonna try to film the rest of this with me holding my daughter. Don't know how this is gonna go. I think she's starting to get tired. Okay, then I read The Pool Boy by Nikki Sloane. This is the 2nd book in her Nashville Neighborhood series, and this is about our heroine who has gotten divorced from her husband after she caught him cheating on her with a man, and he's like, oh no, I'm straight. She's like, nope, I'm done with you. And she's in her 40s, And one day she's home and she has an interaction with her very younger pool boy, who also happens to be her best friend's son. So there is like a 15, almost 20-year age gap between these two characters. And he is like also kind of a musician, and she's like an agent, I guess, in the music industry. So I gave this 4 stars. I loved this. This was very steamy. I loved the older woman, younger man trope, and I don't read a ton of those books, but I really loved it in this. He is such a dirty talker, and I just love that. Yeah, I don't have too many more things to say about this. This was just very steamy and I loved it. Then I read Sailing with Her Wolf by Ariel Marie. This is a like paranormal romance, and this is, I would consider this more of like a novella length. And this is a sapphic romance too. And these are about this book is about 2 best friends who decide to go sailing together, and they get caught in a storm and end up just kind of having to like drift out in the ocean until they can get rescued. But one of our heroines is a wolf shifter and has known ever since she met our other heroine that they were mates, and so that's why she kind of befriended her, but she's very worried about telling her and doesn't know how she'll react to that. So while they're just kind of stuck on this boat, they just decide to kind of explore some sexual attraction they have for each other. I give this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was fun. It was very steamy. Like I said, this is a little bit more novella length, so the plot and like the character development was a little bit underdeveloped for me. But overall, this was really fun. Then I read Don't You Dare by C.E. Ritchie. This is a male-male romance, in college, best friends to lovers kind of romance. This is about our 2 heroes who like to play dares on each other. And in high school, I believe, they're at like a party and a girl dares them to kiss each other, which is kind of a little bit of a sexual awakening for one of our heroes and made him start to realize that he might be bisexual. So then like a couple years later, they're in college, they're roommates, and that hero who thinks he might be bisexual wants to try to start exploring that, and he tells his best friend about this, and his best friend is like, whoa, I don't want you getting into a situation, like I want you to be safe. Why don't you experiment with me to see if this is actually, you know, you're for sure attracted to guys. So that's how they start their more than friends relationship. And they've been best friends forever. They have a little bit of like a codependency thing going on. And I think they've actually been like in love with each other since they were kids, but didn't really know that it was okay to express it as more than just friends. I gave this 4.5 stars. I really liked this one. I just loved their friendship and how connected these 2 characters were. The steam on this was very high. I really love this story. There is trigger warnings for some brief like homophobia from one of the other players, because one of our characters plays on the college like baseball team. So one of the other players like calls him pretty bad names. Yeah, so there is that going on with it. But overall, I really enjoyed this, and I really want to read more C. Ritchie stories. And then the last book that I read for the first half of I almost said May for some reason, for June, is going to be A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. This is a historical romance, and I picked this up because this is brand new. Like I said, it's a historical romance, and it's about a trans character. Our heroine of this story, she hears about her childhood best friend is not doing so well. He has become depressed, and he has become addicted to, I believe it's opium, because of his depression. Because one, he's dealing with the trauma of, they were like at war together, and he's dealing with the trauma of just the war in general. But he thought that she had died during the war. And so he is dealing with his tremendous grief that he feels over losing his best friend. Whereas she didn't die. She had the situation where they thought she died, but she used it to escape her situation and become her and live as a woman who she feels that that's her true self. So she's going to go and like comfort him and like help him out, and then the truth kind of comes out about who she is. I gave this 3 stars. I have mixed feelings about this. It's kind of similar to Wrath, where I loved our 2 main characters. I loved the connection that they had. There are some pretty heavy moments. Especially like when he first realizes who she is, and he's like, you kept this from me and you lied to me. But then she's like, how was I supposed to tell you? And how then they kind of fall in love with each other. And then there are some moments, there are trigger warnings for PTSD in this. Yeah, I'm just gonna have her strawberry butt up here while I'm kind of rocking her. Yeah, so there are some moments where it talks about PTSD. Like there's fireworks that trigger our hero, and he or she has to like help calm him down. There is one sexual scene in this, which I did appreciate that it was in here, but I do kind of wish it was a little bit steamier. I would consider this more like medium steam, because there was the one scene. And I like that they didn't just kind of like it comes out pretty early on that she's trans. And she doesn't keep that from him for like a very long time. So the things that I didn't care for in this book, I thought it was way too long. And for the most part, I was very bored throughout like the entirety of this book. There were also a lot of things with side characters and side plots that were going on that I really just didn't care for at all. I have to put it down while I help her out. But with the side characters, I just didn't care for them whatsoever. I didn't care what was happening with that. I can kind of see where the author may have put those in just to kind of lighten the overall tone of the book, because the little things between our 2 main characters were a lot heavier. But I would have preferred a more darker, heavier book that just focused on the 2 of them, then had all this extra stuff in it, because like I said, it was like boring me to tears. And it's just, it was terrible. So yeah. So those are all the books that I read. Like I said, I read a lot. But overall, it was a pretty good first half of the month. And I'm excited to see what else I'm going to end up reading for this month. Oh, I do want to mention, I'll just go ahead and mention this because I think I ended up DNFing this book on the 15th, which is the cutoff for my like first half. But I did try to start Drag Me Up by RM Virtues, which is the group book for the Queer Romance Readathon, which is going on this week that I'm filming this. And I really wanted to read that because it's a Hades and Persephone retelling. And it features a trans Persephone, but I DNF'd it at like 50 pages because I could not get into the story whatsoever. I have a big problem with books that the POV is third person and present tense. I just don't read that very often. It's usually either first person or third person, but it's usually in past tense. And my brain just kept getting caught up on the tenses. And then there was just a whole lot of other stuff going on with, like the different like Greek gods and like border disputes, and I just felt like there was just too much of that other stuff going on. Like I said, I couldn't get into it, and I was like dreading continuing to read it, so I was like, I might as well just stop reading because it's not for me. which is unfortunate because I was really excited to read it. But anyway, so I did want to mention that, and I mentioned that I'm doing a vlog for the readathon, which will probably go up the week after this video goes up, because this readathon doesn't end until Monday, June 20th is the last day of it. So it'll go up the week after. So stay tuned for that to just kind of hear about a little bit more of my thoughts on some of the books that I read for the readathon. But otherwise, this is going to be the end of the video. So make sure, like I said, if you liked it, hit the thumbs up button. Leave a comment down below about some of the books that you've been reading this month and what you've been enjoying. And subscribe if you haven't already. And otherwise, I will see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.